Bank, to Israel, to Gaza, and saw for ourselves the destruction of buildings and streets and towns 5 months after the invasion by Israel. I saw the symbol of international investment in Gaza, which was the American International School, blown to pieces, the caretaker of which approached me and said that he found body parts of his son, who was the person minding it on the night in question. This is a matter, obviously, of very serious international politics, and we don't have time to deal with all the detail of it here. Suffice it to say that I listened to the response from Prime Minister Netanyahu. I haven't heard any comment yet from Secretary of State Clinton or Special Envoy Tony Blair or indeed Special Envoy George Mitchell. However, the fact that 9 were killed and 30 were injured and that Irish citizens were involved or could have been involved in a tragic incident here obviously puts us in a position where we're in a way central to this. Now, I think it's very important to understand that as this happened in international waters, as the incident occurred after the commandos attacked the ship and boarded the ship in question, this has been deemed to be an act of outrageous aggression on the high seas and was completely unwarranted and completely uncalled for. It has happened, however. The fact of the matter now is that, in many ways, this does represent the first real test of the Lisbon Treaty, which the Irish people endorsed so strongly last year. It means, for instance, that Europe is now challenged with being able to give a comprehensive and coordinated and definite response to an international incident here. Europe did, without objection, allow Israel to become a member of the OECD recently, because this was a European response. We now need a European response to an international illegal blockade of Gaza. And I would hope that the Taoiseach, as the political leader of our country here, would see to it that at the meeting of the heads of government in June, that there is a specific time set aside for a discussion, obviously, on this matter, but that there's also a specific requirement for a decision by Europe in respect of its obligations and responsibilities under the Lisbon Treaty to give a coordinated and comprehensive foreign policy response to an international incident that has occurred on our doorsteps. And I support that very strongly. And insofar as myself is concerned, I've written to all of the heads of government of the European People's Party, stressing the importance of this matter internationally, but also stressing the sensitivity of it insofar as Irish citizens were concerned who have been kidnapped, abducted, and whose whereabouts we're not absolutely clear on. So may I ask the Taoiseach, are there any issues that his government proposed to take at home here insofar as relationships with Israel are concerned, and is it your intention, Taoiseach, to actively seek the support of your colleague Prime Ministers at the June meeting, that there be a definite coordinated response from Europe, as is our entitlement and indeed as is our responsibility, to a very serious international incident that occurred on the high seas, which directly impacted upon a number of Irish citizens and could have had the most tragic consequences for families from our country?
I mean, I don't believe we have to wait for a European Council meeting to have this matter resolved. We're calling for the immediate and unconditional release of our citizens. They're being detained by Israel. We're calling on Israel to respect its international obligations under the Vienna Convention. We want to ensure full consular access by Irish Embassy officials to those detained. That's still not available to us, and we're calling for that to be done immediately. They have no leg to stand on as far as we're concerned in terms of access to our citizens, or indeed for their immediate and unconditional surrender. For their immediate and unconditional release. We have a situation here where they have been brought to Gaza by Israeli authorities. Israeli authorities are asking them to sign papers agreeing to their deportation. It's not they have been brought by these authorities. They are entitled to be released unconditionally, and they're entitled to be released unconditionally immediately. And we're also, as I say, calling on absolute restraint to be shown to the ship, the Irish-owned vessel, the Rachel Corrie, to allow it complete its humanitarian voyage to Gaza peacefully and without any attempt to impede its journey, and to be allowed to discharge its humanitarian cargo in Gaza upon arrival. And we're also, of course, calling immediately for the setting up of a full independent international inquiry into yesterday's events, preferably under UN auspices. That's our position, and I believe that international opinion needs to continue to impress upon Israel that that must be done if there's justice is to be seen to be done in this case.
Second question, Deputy Eamon Gilmore.
John Corley, well, as the Taoiseach has said, and Minister for Foreign Affairs has set out, the government has made a very strong statement on this matter, and the Labour Party supports the strong position that the government has taken on this issue, and specifically supports the demands for the safe passage of the Rachel Corrie, for the unconditional release of those who have been detained, and for the establishment of a full independent and international inquiry as to what happened the other morning, the killings that took place on the flotilla. Can I ask the Taoiseach, because one of the things I think that has become clear over the years is that the government of Israel appears to be very often immune to strong international calls, demands by the United Nations resolutions. The blockade of Gaza itself is not legal, and there seems to be an attitude on the part of the government of Israel when issues like this arise that seems to just weather the storm and ignore international opinion. What actions have you considered, Taoiseach, or has the government considered in the event of the government of Israel ignoring the calls that you have rightly made in respect of the safe passage of the Rachel Corrie, the unconditional release of those who have been detained, and the need for the establishment of a full independent and international inquiry? Has the government given any thought to what action will need to be taken if the government of Israel does not comply with those calls, which have been made by this government and I know by the governments of other countries as well? Have you given any consideration, for example, to the possibility of withdrawing the Irish ambassador from Israel for consultation, which is a course of action that I understand is being considered by other European countries? And has the government been in contact with any of the other European member states, and in particular with the High Representative on Foreign Affairs of the European Union, with regard to action being taken on a coordinated basis by the European Union in the event that the government of Israel persists in the course of action that it appears to be taking, and in the event of it ignoring the calls that have been made upon it by the government of this country, and I think a call that's shared right across the political spectrum in this country, and by the governments of other countries and by the EU?
Taoiseach.
Well, the first obligation that the government has is to ensure that those citizens of ours who were engaged in participating in this flotilla are released from detention presently, or not being subjected to deportation, that they are allowed unconditionally to return to their own country, to this country. And we believe that the presence of our diplomatic personnel in Israel provides us with better prospects of that happening sooner rather than later. But I will make this point, that if any harm comes to any of our citizens, it will have the most serious consequences.
Supplementary, Deputy.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that response from the Taoiseach, and can I say